How you doing, Evan?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So my first question for you is, where would you say you stand politically?
Um, some, I'd say like, I know this is a typical answer, but like half of the issues I find I'm more conservative leaning than the other half. I'd say
Sure.
I'm liberal leaning, but I'd say socially, yeah, it's still about half and half.
Half and half. Cool. Cool. And how would you say that political stance kind of influences how you look upon social aspects in your life?
Well, it definitely dictates my first impression on things. But I mean, the more I get to know about stuff, like my initial opinions don't really matter as much.
Sure. Sure. Makes sense. That's sweet. So my second question is, it's kind of a social topic that's prevalent in today's society, but it's a little off topic. Is have you ever met a transgender person before, kid, adult, any person personally?
Yes, I have.
Could you talk a little more about that?
Well, it's actually your
Right.
sister,
Right.
and I've known her since she was like very young, like
Yeah.
before she can remember.
For
And so,
sure.
actually, that changed my. I actually would say that I was first like on the topic of transgender. Like I wasn't as open minded to it. I wasn't very open minded to it, but then like when I was informed about that now Chazzy,
Right.
she was changing her gender and she was going through that process, like it really personalized it for me, and I think that I need it to happen because like it I realized that the amount I care about about the as or the like ideology behind being transgender, I didn't care of that as much as I cared about this person that
Sure.
decided to go through this. And I was
Sure.
just like, honestly, I was just happy that this person like was doing what felt like they wanted to do, and was becoming more comfortable with themselves, and felt like they were bettering themselves, and like I'm just and was safe, happy,
For sure.
and that going through that, then I realized that like, well, I mean, everybody. If anybody, I feel like if anybody were in my position, or at least the majority of people, they would have felt the same way, and that's how. And I kind of broadened that to, well, this must be how it would feel for everybody that must know it, someone who's transgender, and for people that are transgender. Like the closer you are to the topic, the more you actually realize that it's less about you and more about what they want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. My third question for you is more related to transgender people, and feel free to answer however you wish. It's kind of specific. So, but how do you feel? How do you feel about transgender youth having the same rights as their cisgender counterparts? So people like me and you who identify with their biological sex that's been assigned at birth. How do you feel about transgender youth having the same rights within schools as their cisgender counterparts? Things like being able to go to the bathroom they identify, the locker room they identify, being called the name that they identify with their name, other things related to their gender. How do you feel about them having the same rights? So effectively going to whatever bathroom they feel like, they identify with locker room, etc. How do you feel about that in terms of having as a nation, as a society as a whole?
I feel like that's a tough talk or discussion because like you can see why people would feel uncomfortable with that, and then why other kids might feel uncomfortable with that. But if it was just up to me, like I think that if you feel like you identify as something, you should probably be able to use your bathroom. But at the same time, like I do understand if like a parent or student is uncomfortable. I guess that's all I can say about it now.
Absolutely.
I'd have to think about it more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Perfect. I mean, I guess my final thing is like, and it's cool if you don't, but like, do you have any like questions for me right now, or anything else that you would want to say or ask about regarding this topic, or really anything related to this topic, it's cool if you don't right now.
I guess all I could say is like kind of a repeat of what I said earlier, that like I can understand why people would be against the aspect of being transgender. That's only because they haven't had personal experience to it. And then like if they don't after personal experience, then that's their choice. But no, I'm glad that I happened to meet such a wonderful person as your sister that helped me realize my actual like what like it prioritized my like what matters to me. So yeah,
For sure, brother. Hey, thanks for talking to me, dude.
yeah, sure.
Sweet. Hey, Emily, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I just want to say, first off, thanks for talking with me.
Of course.
So my first question for you is, where would you say you stand politically?
Like on which side?
Yeah, however you want to answer it. On which side, your ideals, kind of thing, whatever.
I
take
don't
it anyway.
think like my family's super conservative, but I think I'd probably consider myself more conservative, but I haven't really done enough research of my own or like inquiries of my own to really like stand firm on a side. And I don't typically believe on like swinging either way. I like, researching and figuring out my own opinion first.
Sure.
So
It's very cool. So I guess a follow-up question for you, and like you said, you said you haven't done that much research on kind of where you stand, which is totally fine. So this question may not be applicable, but would you say like for social issues, like human rights issues, or school shootings or things like that, or gun issues, would you say that you are also more conservative with that, or is that more liberal? You don't really know, kind of thing.
I don't really know how to classify my own opinion.
Sure.
My opinion is more just like worrying about like the safety of others while at the same time like letting people do what they feel is right to do, without like controlling their every single movement.
Absolutely. Perfect. Awesome. So my next question for you is, and this is a little off topic, but like I said before, or maybe I forgot to say, but the topic of this whole thing is kind of like transgender youth rights within school. So my next question is, and you may not have, but have you ever like met a transgender person before, kind of thing, or not really, or?
Met, yes, but like I didn't know them very well. I just knew them because they were in my physics class in high school.
Sure, and in like you said, you didn't know them very well, but could you speak a little bit on any interaction that you had with them? Or you just can't really remember because it was in high school, or?
I mean, his name was Davey, and I didn't really know much about him, but some of my friends were close with him, and so
Sure.
I know that he transitioned at some point during his high school years. He was very smart. Like I liked being around him. He was really nice, but I didn't really talk to him much.
Sure. Awesome. Sweet. So that's like a perfect segue actually into my next question, which is kind of the crux of the whole conversation. And feel free, and I can. This is kind of like a long question, so I can repeat it and things like that, if need be. But I'm gonna use a term in this question, cisgender, and cisgender just means that you identify with the sex that you were assigned at birth. So me and you, Evan, Chloe, we're all cisgender people. Transgender people, they transition.
Yeah.
So like I said, like the topic of this is transgender youth rights within school. So my question for you is, how do you feel about transgender youth having the same rights in school as their cisgender counterparts? So things like being able to use the locker room that they want to use, that they identify, the gender they identify with, the bathroom that they identify with, being called the name that they prefer to be called, and other things related to gender within the school.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about, because obviously, cisgender people get all those rights. Yeah. How do you feel about transgender youth having those same rights, kind of thing?
They're people all the same. They get the exact same rights. They should get the exact same rights as every other person. It's not us to dictate who somebody wants to be. So I don't think that there should be like rules on what they can and can't use. If that is where they feel comfortable, that is where they should go, in my personal opinion.
Absolutely perfect. So I guess my final like closing topic, and it's cool if you don't, like, if you don't, but like, do you have like anything else that you want to say, or any further questions for me regarding this topic? Any inquiries? And like I said, it's cool. It's cool if you don't, kind of thing.
How strict are the different rules that they
Sure.
are you that like are they trying to change them or
Yeah.
what was
No, yeah, exactly. That's a great question. So, like, I'm actually doing this project because it's based off a persuasive essay that I did about kind of this topic.
okay.
So as you may have heard of or whatever, like this is kind of like becoming a bigger national issue in terms of like within school policy. So, in some schools within more conservative states and conservative counties, there's transgender kids who aren't receiving the same rights that compared to cisgender counterparts, but places more liberal, like where I live, like the policy is very up to date and modern, so that transgender student rights are protected. So, but there's a lot of kind of issues that go into it, which kind of makes it hard for the policy to get moving forward in any direction, really, whether like backwards or forwards in terms of the rights of transgender youth. So it's been very stagnant for reasons like parents are like, I don't want like a person who's technically male in the female bathroom, things like that. Other students being uncomfortable about it, teachers being uncomfortable about it. So, but yeah, it's been a big issue, and it's hard because it becomes more of a state issue. Do you want some water?
I'm good.
Okay, let me know if you want some water. But it becomes more of a state issue, which means that it can vary more between state to state and county to county.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very prominent social issue. So that's kind of why I wrote my persuasive essay about it. And I'm doing this remediation of it just to get other, my peers, my friends' perspectives on it, because it's very interesting. And for other kids our age who maybe like don't know anything about this or have an opinion about it or whatever, for them to see something like this, see their peers' perspectives, it could be like beneficial in terms of helping them form their own opinion.
Yeah, I understand that. I think it's definitely hard when you're talking about the comfortableness of both people who are transitioning and people who don't really know a lot about it.
Absolutely, and that's what kind of makes this topic a tough topic to talk about and to make policy around, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, do you have any other? Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Kind of? Perfect, awesome, Emily. Well, I just want to say thanks for your time. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
Thanks.
Sweet. Hey, Dan, I just want to say thanks for being here, brother.
No problem. I'm happy to be here.
Sweet. So, my first question for you is like, where would you say you stand politically?
Okay. I would say my general political views are leaning towards the right side.
Sure.
I'm a registered Republican, and I generally lean in that direction, obviously, since I'm registered, and that's just how I was growing up, and that's how I am.
So would you say like so obviously you're a registered Republican, leaning towards the right side. Would you say that differs between like financial issues and social issues, or is it kind of just the same for both?
I would say I lean right, but to different severities of degrees. I'd say financially probably more than socially. Like I'm like farther right. Yeah.
Sure, and could you? And it's okay if you can't, but could you speak more on kind of why maybe for social issues you lean less right compared to financial issues?
Okay. Well, financially, I believe in more of a top-down economic system, similar to like what Reagan implemented.
Sure.
So I just believe that's the most efficient way to properly disperse money throughout the economy. Versus socially, there's some issues that I think that I find more viewed left on. But again, there's more split for me. It depends on the actual specific issue for me.
Absolutely. Perfect. So that's actually a perfect segue into my next question. So this conversation is focused on social issues. So this is a little off topic, but a good segue. Have you ever personally met a transgender person before?
I have not
at all. Like any. Sorry about that. It's a little far away. Like anyone in your school or anyone that maybe you've known or.
Oh, actually, I did.
Okay.
although I didn't know when I met
Sure.
him, because he's actually in 3 grades below me, so I knew there was like when I was a
Sandra
senior, he
was
was a
talking
freshman.
about this.
Yeah,
Okay.
I knew there was a transgender kid. He was actually in student council with me. I just didn't know until actually almost when I graduated. So
Sure.
I actually never saw him after I found out, just because student council was over at that point.
Right.
But I met him, but really before I knew he was transgender.
So like you would have, if no one ever told you or you never found out transgender, there would have been no inclination, really, just kind of like a normal whatever, just like a regular kid or whatever.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's cool. So my third question is, which is really the crux of this whole conversation, is right, because this topic is about transgender student rights within school. So and when I ask this question, it's kind of a long run. Feel free to ask me to repeat it or ask questions about it,
Right.
Before you answer whatever. So how do you feel about transgender youth having the same rights as their cisgender counterparts within school? So things like having the same rights as their cisgender counterparts in terms of locker room policy, right? Going to the locker room that they with the gender that they identify with. You could say the same thing about bathroom, going to the same bathroom that they identify with. Even going into things like being called the name that they want to be called, as well as other things like related to gender, just for administrative purposes. So how would you say? Because obviously, cisgender people don't have to really deal with that at all, because no one really questions them. But how do you feel about transgender youth having the same?
I feel like they should definitely be able to treat it who they believe they should be like treated as, who they identify as. As for like locker room, I do understand that how people might find it uncomfortable. So I think the perfect situation would be have like an alternative like locker room, where like it's okay, like it's more of like a, because like I understand people are uncomfortable. I could understand why they'd be uncomfortable. So I also want to like make sure no one is uncomfortable if they wanted to like change in the locker room they identify with.
Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense, and you kind of touched upon a little bit. There's also perspectives of the parents of these kids and the students themselves and teachers. So there's just kind of a lot to keep in mind. So to kind of close it out, I mean, thank you for your time. But is there any last note you want to say, or any questions or inquiries you have for me regarding this topic, or really anything we talked about today? It's okay if you don't, by the way. Just kind of.
Actually, this actually reminds me of like a story. Like the school district right next to us actually had like a really big like news story about this, because they had a kid who was transgender, but they didn't let him in the right bathrooms. But there was a backlash. But then parents backlashed against the backlash.
Sure.
So what they eventually decided was to have like an alternative changing room for actually after he decided like came out openly, said I'm like transgender. Others followed, so it really worked out because they had more of an open area to speak about how they feel. So.
Sure, like a platform.
Right, exactly.
No, that's very interesting actually. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, and anything else? Any other questions or comments, concerns?
Unless you have any other questions, that's.
No, I mean that's it for me, Dan. Yeah, hey, thanks for your time, dude. Appreciate
Thank you very much.
Great conversation.
Did you mind?